what does Russian reliance on the Wagner Group in its current war mean for Ukrainians? What can 1,000 far-right mercenaries do that tens of thousands of regular Russian soldiers could not? It's unlikely they can win this war for Russia, but given their history, it seems certain that they can kill a lot of innocent people trying. Joining me now are Ali Soufan, a former FBI counterterrorism agent, and former Ambassador Nathan Sales, who served in the Trump administration as acting Undersecretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights. Together, they wrote a recent NBC News opinion essay on Putin's close affinity with neo-Nazis, including among his mercenaries. Thank you both for joining me. Ali, let me start with you. Putin says he needs to denazify Ukraine, and to do it, he's called in actual neo-Nazi contractors. Just how widespread is far-right sentiment among these mercenaries generally and in Wagner in particular? Ali, you might be muted. We can't hear you.
Apologies. This is one of the disinformation campaigns that Russia is doing. And it's interesting that the disinformation campaign of the Kremlin is basically connected to the same individuals, gentlemen that you mentioned, who also in charge of the Wagner Group and behind the Wagner Group. Russia has been promoting, have been recruiting neo-Nazis and extreme far-right groups from all over Europe, frankly, and the United States. Frankly, Ambassador Sales was involved in classifying the Russian imperial movement as a terrorist organization in the United States because of the involvement that Russia was trying to do in U.S. among far-right organizations. Not only that, Putin looked at it in a more strategic perspective. He used this information in groups like a Wagner Group to expand foreign influence, to expand the Kremlin's influence in Western countries, but also he have a structural base to reach out to many far-right groups and have them come to Russia and be part of the Russians' influence operations. For example, in St. Petersburg, they do an event hosted by the International Conservative movement, the International National Conservative Movement, which is basically very similar to how the jihadis and Al-Qaeda used to have Maktab al-Khadamat. They ask all these groups to come over, and then the Russian imperial movement and Wagner groups start targeting very violent neo-Nazis to be part of their movement. So Mr. Putin is not trying to denazify Ukraine. Mr. Putin is using Nazis in order to expand his influence, not only on Ukraine, but also to divide Western societies.
Ambassador Sales, given all of that, last week Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asked Joe Biden to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. What would such a move mean, and do you think it's warranted?
Well, the state-sponsored terrorism sanction is about as strict as it gets. That's the gold standard when it comes to U.S. sanctions on foreign countries. It cripples the economies of these countries. It makes trade very difficult. It makes exports next to impossible. And it's something that I think the Biden administration should look at very, very closely. Look, Putin has done far more than what other countries have done to get themselves on the state-sponsored terrorism list. Remember, North Korea got put back on the list in part because Kim Jong-un was using prohibited chemical weapons to assassinate a family member who was seen as a threat to his rule. Does that sound familiar? I mean, this is a page right out of Vladimir Putin's playbook, having poisoned opposition figures with polonium and Novichok across the European continent. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Vladimir Putin's Russia has been bankrolling terrorist groups like the Russian Imperial Movement, which was designated in the last administration. He's been targeting civilians for execution, including in the most brutal and horrific ways imaginable. It sure seems like Putin's regime meets the standards, and I think it's something the administration should look at very closely.
So, Ali, Vladimir Putin's far-right connections and sympathies are well established, but to what extent is he right, or are critics right, about Ukrainian elements also having neo-Nazi ties? In particular, what should we make of the Azov battalion, which is part of Ukraine's civil defense structure, and which a lot of supporters of the Russian government point out, well, you know, they're right, there is a neo-Nazi group within the Ukrainian. What's your response when people say that?
Sure. I was probably one of the first people who started talking about Azov and the Azov battalion and its connection to some neo-Nazi groups early on. However, after the election of President Zelensky, there was significant pressure from the Ukrainian administration and, frankly, from the US administration to disconnect the relationship between Azov and the National Guards in Ukraine. And actually, that led to kind of cutting the wings of many of the neo-Nazis who are associated with Azov. Ukraine is a Western society. Neo-Nazis and white supremacy is a disease in many Western societies, and yes, they have it. But also, Ukraine is a country that has a Jewish president whose family survived the Holocaust, and since he has been elected, he worked very hard to clip the power of these organizations. Azov is not the same. It does not have the same power that it used to have before. And if you look at the neo-Nazi organizations and groups, and if you look at the ecosystem of, frankly, the far right, to include here in the United States, they are all sympathetic, not to Zelensky, they are sympathetic to Putin. Either they defend Putin, they defend Putin, or at least they see the conflict in Ukraine through his lenses.
Ambassador Sale, of course, just returning to Wagner, lots of nations have private military companies. So I have to ask, you served under a president, Donald Trump, who gave clemency to several convicted or accused American war criminals, and not just military men. He pardoned 4 Blackwater guards who had been convicted of killing 14 Iraqis and wounding 17 others when they fired into cars in traffic in Baghdad in 2007 unprovoked. It was a ghastly case, and Trump exonerated those American mercenaries. Doesn't that sort of hypocrisy and whitewashing of war crimes make it harder for the U.S. to hold Russian mercenaries accountable for their abuses abroad?
Well, like American soldiers, American mercenaries commit abuses like everybody, but not like the Russians do. Mistakes get made, abuses happen. The American system is designed to hold perpetrators responsible. The Russian system is designed to reward perpetrators of war crimes. Just this week, Vladimir Putin, as you said in your opening, Mehdi, honored the perpetrators of the most horrific war crimes we've seen on European soil in 70 years.
Didn't Donald Trump do the same with those Navy SEALs he pardoned? Wasn't he honoring them? He invited them to events.
Look, whataboutism is a game that doesn't do us much good in these circumstances. The point is, Vladimir Putin represents a clear and present danger to the international order, to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He is waging a war of extermination. He's the person we should be focusing on now, how to stop him, how to sanction his economy, how to cripple his industry, and how to get Ukraine the MiG and other weapons it needs to defend itself.
I completely agree with you that we should focus on Putin. That's why we led the show talking about Wagner Group and Putin. I'm just wondering, isn't it easier to hold Putin and others to account if we hold our own war criminals to account? And that didn't happen under the last administration. Ali, one last question to you on Wagner Group is, what are they going to do going forward right now? How worried should Ukrainians be about their role, or are we overstating their military presence, their effectiveness?
I don't think we should overstate anything about the Wagner Group. I think there's a potential that they become bigger and bigger, and the Russians use them to create this gray zone kind of battlefield. We already see their involvement not only with massacres in Ukraine and with what's happening in Ukraine, but also we see them operating in many African countries, as you mentioned. We see them operating in Syria. We see them also diversifying their stream of income. Sometimes in Africa, they get paid in diamond and gold. Sometimes they get paid in oil and gas in Syria and other places. They are very dangerous. And now I think with the war going on, there's a big possibility that we're going to start seeing a shift into an insurgency. And a group like the Wagner Group will be utilized by the Russians to commit many massacres against the Ukrainians.
Very worrying times. We'll have to leave it there. Ali Soufan and former Ambassador Nathan Sales, thank you both for your time. Appreciate it.